Well, congratulations on this. I so enjoyed it. And I was saying, we were talking about it after the film and I walked out and I thought, some of the scenes are just so subtle and so, but I didn't know that my heart was going to keep beating for 15 minutes after I walked into the theater. I don't ever recall that ever happening to me. It was tense. I don't know what else to say. I had such a good time watching this. Was this your intention to just keep it, as subtle as possible, but just bring that tension to us?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the beginning
Oh,
in
just
particular?
the whole film,
Oh, the whole
even
film.
right at the end,
yeah.
too.
Well, the opening in particular was this whole notion of this is a guy who's walking into a place we don't know where he's going. It's clearly a kind of pop-up of places like this sort of nocturnal gambling den that's up in the Hollywood Hills, and he's clearly there to spend or gamble a lot of money, but we don't really know how far he's going to go, and then it becomes clearer and clearer that he's literally pushing the envelope. So it was trying to convey that without dialogue, because there's no dialogue in the first 10 minutes of the film virtually. Exactly. And then after that it becomes much more verbal. Yeah. But to try and shoot that, I shot it like a Western.
Yeah.
So because I wanted that tension.
That's how it felt, for sure. And how did you know Mark Wahlberg was going to pull this off? Because, he is fantastic in this movie. The way he just rambles off the monologues and everything, but he lost 60 pounds to play this. He I don't know, did you let him eat on set? Was he tense on set?
He was tense. When you don't eat, you're tense. But he went through a very careful diet program, and but it must have been challenging for him. I mean, You'd have to ask him, but it's exhausting when you don't eat.
Well, I was going to say, it must have been exhausting watching him perform this role, because I honestly, what he did in this movie, I thought by far one of his best performances ever.
Oh, great. Yeah. No, I mean, look, Mark's a very understated actor. He's somebody that has a sort of seemingly effortless, I think it's what makes him a movie star, but he has an extraordinary presence. But he's a little bit like a duck. You don't always see the feet paddling. He's very smooth and very kind of understated. And I think, in a way, this part is perhaps displaying more of what goes on beneath the surface with him as an actor. And it's great for that reason.
It makes you think a lot about gambling and why people do it and what drives their addictions. What did you learn about it while, even researching this?
Well, for me, it was never a film about addictions per se, and in the sense of the original film is very much a study in addiction, by my understanding. But yes. But this is about a guy who's looking to escape. It's a guy who wants to get out of his life, who has a very set path, and he uses gambling as a means to an end. Mm-hmm. Now, he may not make it, he may not survive in the process, but the whole intention is to kind of blow everything up so he can have zero at the end, which is kind of an interesting story, because we're all programmed to go and see movies like Rocky, or the aspirational kind of the guy's the victor at the end, or the girl's the victor. But with this, it's a guy who's an overdog who wants to become an underdog.
Yeah, your casting, including Mark, of course, is fantastic. Bree and everybody in this movie is great. John Goodman. I mean, seriously, were you pinching yourself, especially the wonderful monologue that he delivers close to the end of the film? Yeah.
It's often on a film when you're shooting it, you get a sense of the success of the scene by way of the faces on the crew, and those guys have seen everything, obviously, and so more often than not, they're doing that. Whereas everybody was zoned in on Frank that day, on John Goodman's character, because he was so fantastic. But he's effortl's. He's there's a great deal of effort.
Yes, but he makes it look.
Yeah, he makes it look easy. Yeah, makes my job easy.
Well, yeah, you did a great job directing this, and then of course, that wonderful speech. And I just have to know, did it resonate with you? Was there somebody that you wanted to just have your FU moment?
For sure. I mean, he's got a very different philosophy on life to Jim, Mark's character, who's a guy who kind of believes in wealth coming from inside, whereas Frank's the devil. He's a guy who's like, you got to have $2 million in the bank, and you got to have your fortress of solitude and your house and all of these things set up, and that way you can protect yourself from the wolves around you. So he's a materialistic guy for sure. So I'd like to fall more into Mark's camp, into Jim's camp, as a guy who sort of you don't necessarily need all of that to be happy.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations on this. Did a really outstanding job, and a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for coming to Toronto. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.